Previously on BushWarV.
Ek het teruggehardloop na die ratel toe en toe is al die rook en goed natuurlik weg en ek het gesien dat ons uitgeskiet was en ek het gesien die ouens wat dood was binne. Het was 'n vreeslike gesig.
There were, tanks dotted around the place and other vehicles that had been shot out. There was absolutely nothing left there. It was just total devastation.
Ons was op die Quito-front vasgepen. Ons het gedink die gevegte van daar plaas en die 50ste brigade is afgeskuif na Kalawek aan die onderkant en het onmiddellike bedreiging vir ons agtergebied.
Fidel Castro explained his military strategy very well. He said, my strategy is like the boxer. With the left hand, he holds the blow, and then with the right, he strikes. Quito Cuanavale is the left hand that holds the blow, is a defensive victory. The right that strikes is the advance of the Cuban troops towards the border of Namibia in the southwest that begins in March 1988.
Om 'n idee te gee, dis omtrent so ver van daai oostelike gebied af waar hulle was na die westelike gebied toe waar hulle toe nou gegaan het, soos wat Denemarke is van Engeland af.
The Cuban and Angolan deployment in southwestern Angola had already started in November 1987. By May 88, there was a considerable Cuban force in this area. The runways at the airports of Kahama and Shangongo were improved to accommodate MiG-23s. Cuban and FAPLA artillery, armour and anti-aircraft capacity were increased. In reaction, 3 companies of 3-2 Battalion and a combat group of 6-1 Mechanized were positioned south of Techipa and southeast of Kalawek. They were engaged in several artillery battles with Cuban tanks and soldiers and FAPLA troops. Clive Holt was with 6-1 Mechanized.
6-1 was deployed. We went into a position where we'd set up a sort of temporary base, logistical base at Kalawek.
The mounting tension would reach a dramatic climax on the 27th of June. Hein Groenewald was also at Kalawek that day.
Ons was die keer die afvoerpeloton gewees en ons is rondom die Ruacana watervalle gewees, Ruacana en die Kalawek dam.
Clive and his group had been in an unexpected contact the previous day. One of his friends had been killed.
So I wasn't feeling all that great. And then one of the guys said, come down to the dam, we'll try and catch some fish.
Hein was part of a Casevac team tasked with fetching the wounded from the battle zone.
By die Kalawek dam het ons teruggery en ons was 'n rukkie daar gewag vir die Puma helikopters om die ouens af te voer. Die Pumas het ingekom, dadelik die ouens gevat en weggevlieg.
We were standing on the edge of the dam. I had a line in there, and then out of the blue we saw these 2 fighter aircraft coming up the opposite side of the dam.
Gewoonlik wat gebeur, jy kry die militêre die vliegtuie dopgehou, die vyandlike vlieg. Jy kry 'n stand wit, stand oranje en stand rooi.
Stand rooi, they're coming in for an attack. There'd been nothing. So we all thought, those are a couple of mirages, until they banked and turned over the dam and started heading towards us. We then identified them as MiGs, and we were standing on the edge of the dam with hand lines with these planes bearing straight down on us.
Wat ek later aan gehoor het, die Kubaanse of Russiese vlieëniers het basies deur die vallei baie laag en laat onder ons radar ingevlieg en toe ons sien was hulle op ons gewees.
I believe the target was the dam wall. We're not too sure why.
Die Pumas was, ek kon hulle nog sien, hulle net beweeg en hulle basies die wit waks uit ons uitgebom.
It was one of those points where everybody just ran. You just dropped everything and ran. It was a few hundred meters back to where the foxholes were. You just want to get shelter because those 500-pound bombs, if you're above ground when they hit, that's it, you're gone. It'll just tear you to pieces. I remember as we were turning around to run, I actually saw the bombs release off the wings of one of the planes. And I just couldn't help thinking, that's it. Today is my last day. I'm gone.
Ons het net onder die ratels ingespring want daar was geen loopgrawe nie. Ons het nie dit verwag wat hulle sou doen nie. En ja, hulle het ons gebom en aanhoudend gebom met masjiengeweervuur uit die lug uit oral.
One of the bombs went slightly off target. There was a biffle sitting there and it got a direct hit and killed 11 guys in one go.
Een persoon het toe Sam missiel, as ek dit terug nie mis het nie, het op een van die vliegtuie geskiet van ons af en toe het hulle gewyk, maar dit was 'n 5 of 10 minute van hel gewees.
Historian Piero Iglesias has had access to CIA documents concerning this period.
Immediately after this, the South Africans destroy one bridge on the Kunene River. And the American reading, again, is that the South Africans are trying to destroy the points the Cubans can use to enter into Namibia, because that what seems possible now.
Ons het 'n volledige reeks gebeurlikheidsplanne ontwikkel, het sy om aan te val, of om 'n tipe van 'n mobiele verdediging te veg terug in Grootfontein se omgewing en dan om ook voorsiening te maak vir die geweldige oormag wat teen ons kon ontplooi word, want ons op daai stadium dokumentasie onderskep waar Castro gesê het dat hy die Suid-Afrikaners se bloedneus wil gee.
In South Africa, cracks were showing in the support for the war. In early July, Die Kerkbode, mouthpiece of the Dutch Reformed Church, published an editorial saying it would seem as if the more or less permanent presence of South African troops in this foreign country can be questioned on Christian ethical grounds.
They argue it in moral terms, but I think that's not what triggers the editorial. I think it's just that now the war is getting costly. I have now South African documents that address this issue. They say South African public opinion is not willing to take any more casualties in Angola.
Just 2 weeks after the Kerkbode editorial, the next round of negotiations took place in New York. After 3 days, the first public document was tabled, a blueprint for peace between the Angolans and Cubans on the one side and the South Africans on the other. Chester Crocker believes the two parties had to protect each other in order to achieve a breakthrough.
Protect each other's honor, protect each other's soft parts, and to find a way to extricate themselves from what had become a fairly costly conflict in a godforsaken part of a large undergoverned country which had a lot of empty spaces. And I don't think there was a winner. I think the victor here was common sense.
En ek noem dit 'n ewewig van belange. Selfs as een party dan net 10% en 'n ander een miskien 60 het, almal het voordeel. En as dit sterk genoeg is, kan jy 'n deal deurdruk, kan jy 'n onderhandeling deurdruk en kan jy 'n resultaat bereik.
Just 2 weeks after New York, the negotiators met again, this time in Geneva.
En die dag voor die samesprekings sou begin, toe vra ek vir myself uit die vraag af, as mense toestemming gee vir implementering van resolusie 435, hoe lank sal dit die VN vat om hulle vredestroepe in posisie te hê sodat die skietstilstand kan begin?
Chester Crocker estimated it could happen within 3 months.
Toe gaan ek die aand na, ek en Brigadier Sonnekus, na meneer Neil van Heerden toe, wat die leier was van die afvaardiging. Toe sê ek vir hom, hoekom gaan ons nie môreoggend en bied aan 1 November as die datum vir die implementering van resolusie 435 nie?
A whirlwind of telephone calls later, from Foreign Affairs to President P.W. Botha to Defence and back, the team had the approval they needed.
Toe die volgende oggend daar gekom, toe het dit voorgestel, en toe was daar lang stilte gewees. 'n baie lang stilte. En toe het almal verdaag, en daar was nooit weer samesprekings daai dag nie.
At the end of August, the South African troops withdrew from Angola. A ceasefire was announced. 5 more meetings in Brazzaville led to agreements which were finally signed on the 22nd of December in New York. It was stipulated that the Cubans and the South Africans would withdraw. SWAPO would retreat north of the 16th parallel. all hostilities would cease. Resolution 435 would come into force on the 1st of April 1989.
En hier op 1 April 89 het dit soos 'n mal Aprilsvoel ding vir my voorgekom toe SWAPO guerrillas op groot maat sê ek vir jou, oor die noordelike grens borrel en begin met hulle invalle. Daardie selfde dag was Margaret Thatcher toevallig in Suidwes-Afrika.
On the 1st of April, Pik Botha met Margaret Thatcher at Windhoek Airport before her flight home.
Toe ons in die vertrek nou vir BPB persone, persone gaan sit, mooi uitgerus was, toe ons gaan sit, toe kom die eerste oproep, dat op groot skaal, van 'n sekere van ons generaals, bevelvoerders direk na my, het SWAPO nou oor die grens gekom.
One question mark remains. Was SWAPO leader Sam Njoma himself involved?
Hulle wou dan, as die VVO wat se sending altaar was, inkom, ontmoet hy 'n geweldige kontingent, 'n gewapende kontingent van SWAPO, wat die indruk sou geskep het, maar hulle het hierdie deel van die land al beset, teen die Suid-Afrikaanse veiligheidsmagte, wat nooit die geval was nie. Njoma ontken dit, maar ek sê hy het hom gegee. Ek het met daai vegters gepraat, en hulle het gesê, ons chef, die hoof, meneer Njoma, het ons daai opdrag gegee. Dit was 'n baie groot strategiese fout.
Charles Namolo refused to comment on what had happened there.
That's a very difficult question. I don't want to talk about it. That operation, I think, was most difficult for many of us being planned combatants. But it's very difficult to explain nowadays.
The bigger picture was just as murky.
Why the Angolans let it happen has always eluded us, because they could have prevented it, but chose not to, or else didn't move fast enough to stop it. And so it was left to the South Africans, in effect, to reverse it with the permission of everybody else.
Op daai stadium was feitlik die hele Suid-Afrikaanse weermag onttrek alreeds uit Namibië uit. Daar was nog elemente van die Suid-Wes-Afrika gebiedsmag, wat dis hulle tuiseenhede is daar. Daar was 'n paar helikopters oor, en die polisie en die Suid-Afrikaanse helikopters het eintlik die situasie gered.
Ben Venter with 101 Battalion was still in Oshakati.
Ons was gedemobiliseer, al die troepe was by die huis, die Kaspers was op Grootfontein, die wapens was in. Ons het dit afgery en gaan pak onder UNTAC toesig, in containers op trokke gewees. Vrede het neergedaal op Wambuland, het almal gesê. Toe kom 1 April. Die enigste mense wat toe nou ontplooi was in Wambuland was Koevoet.
Ons het gedink is verby, maar toe hoor ons hierso by Eelvier se kant, toe hoor ons SWAPO is in, daar ben op Poe. Aan die kant as jy verby Shakaji, jy gaan op Poe. Hulle het daar begin kontak gemaak.
Ons troepe is toe in hulle barakke klaar gekonsentreer in terme van resolusie 435. Onder toesig van die VN. Jy mag hulle nie daaruit nie.
Dit was, UNTAC was in bevel geweest. Die UNTAC het ook in ons basis ingetrek. Ons het eintlik half pelle geword. Hulle het natuurlik toe die skote klap 1 April toe hardloop hulle verdekking, want wat ou nou kan verstaan, hulle was nie daar om oorlog te maak nie. Hulle moes die twee groepe uitmekaar uithou en hulle was nie lus om betrokke te raak by dit nie.
Pik Botha knew who could get involved, but first he had to convince Margaret Thatcher.
Ek sê, Madam Prime Minister, I have no choice. Our troops will have to be released from their barracks. And they say, under no circumstances, without the permission of the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Botha, under no circumstances are you going to violate the conditions of Resolution 435. And this is a violation.
The fact that she happened to be out there at this time was just pure coincidence. It was serendipity. And one wonders how the history would have been written if she had not been there.
Terwyl sy sit in dieselfde kamer, het ek vir de Quelle aangebel. Toe sê de Quelle, look, I can't give permission without the Security Council. Toe sê ek, but Mr. Secretary General, it will take you a week. En hy so mompel so, en hy mompel so, en hy sê, but this puts me in an awful embarrassment. Toe sê ek, no, Mr. Secretary General, don't worry. I will see to it that you are not embarrassed by the decision. It will be a limited operation on our part. It will not be a full-fledged war. When the job is done of stemming the tide, they'll be back in their barracks and you can then take credit. Thank you for your permission en ek sit die foon neer. Ek sit die foon neer. Sonder om verder te wag en ek bel Atasari. En ek sê, Dequelle had agreed en ek bel die veiligheidsmense en ek sê, you can release the troops.
Thatcher stood squarely behind this decision.
She made it very abundantly clear in New York, where it counted, with Perez de Cuellar and with the UN Secretariat, that what had just happened was in violation of everything that had been negotiated and should not be allowed to stand, and therefore something had to be done about it, and that what the South Africans were doing, as long as it was within measure, should be tolerated, even if not welcomed.
Die oggend van 2 April, toe is dit 'n feit. Toe Koevoet nou 'n kontak gehad met hierdie klomp swapos wat afgekom het en daar is chaos in Wambuland.
Shakati Rondo en Opua. Hulle sê swapos in en hulle is baie. Wat jy ry, jy vra mense, hulle sê, hoor jy so, het was hier so gewees 100 of 50 of 10 met hulle sê kanon wat hulle sleep.
Ons het op radio Wambo het ons laat uitsaai en die troepe laat hulle moet terugkom eenheid toe. Hulle het so in drips en draps begin terugkom. Hulle was daai middag was daar nogal seker so die helfte van die eenheid was terug gewees. En soos wat die Kaspers opgebom was, soos wat die wapens op was en die radio se konnekteerders en koms getoets is en die ammunisie uitgedeel is en troepe hulle klere gaan kry het op die Kaspers gespring en ons het ontplooi. Ons het gery daarvandaan noord en dit was 'n absolute free for all.
Omdat ons nog gehoor het by die radio en enige span wat daar by die bos was, hy sê hy het spore, maar daai spore is nie 4 mense of 10 nie, meer as 30. En ons het gedink, ja, nee, hulle is hier so.
Ek het geweet van Umgulumbashi want ek het daar gehoor van, want ek het gehoor dis waar die oorlog begin het. Nou toe ons oor daai hoogtetjie kom, toe krioel Umgulumbashi letterlik soos die terre hardloop, soos wat Swapo hardloop. Toe is hulle daar en hulle is tussen die en toe is dit toe het ons nou 'n lekker oorlog aan die gang die middag. Dit was die 5de April gewees. Daar later 2 of 3 Koevoetspanne bygekom.
Daai dag, ja, ons het bietjie swaar gekry op by ons kant. Ons het mense verloor daarso en ja, daai dag dit was 'n moeilike dag gewees, daai 1 April.
Die oorlog het nie op daai dag geëindig nie, hy het 2 dae later geëindig. Fisies die oorlog. Maar van die heel laaste skote het ook by Umgulumbashi geklap, soos wat die heel eerste skote by Umgulumbashi geklap het, 23 jaar voor dit.
American figures indicate that 375 SWAPO soldiers died in that week. The whole delicate balance achieved in years of negotiations was almost blown apart as well.
Ek het dan geslaag om die Angolese, Kubanen, Amerikaners en die Russe Sovjet-Unie by mekaar te kry vir 'n ontmoeting by Berg Etjo. Etjo is omtrent so 200 kilometer noordwes van Windhoek. Ons het die ding gered omdat Angola die staanspoor gesê het, SWAPO did the wrong thing. We will announce it publicly. We agree with you, Mr. Minister. Die Kubane het dieselfde gesê. Vir die eerste keer was al 3 van ons in 'n krisissituasie eensgesind.
A statement was issued in which SWAPO's actions were condemned, and they were again compelled to withdraw to the north of the 16th parallel.
As jy my nou vra van watter oomblik in my lewe was dit vir my eisenwekkend, dan is dit vir my, as ek terugdink vandag hoe dat die hele implementering op 1 April 89 amper gekelder is.
The process was rescued. Ensured of peace, people started returning. A total of about 42,000 Namibians came back to the country.
We were on the aeroplane and toe het hulle gesê, we are entering Namibian airspace. Toe loer ons bietjie, soos die aeroplane, you know, it's coming down. And I said to my neighbor, oh, is dit wat ons baklei het, want dit was 18de June, die gras was geel, die lewe was so droog. Ek dink, is dit die wat ons so baie jare beter kan geplei het. Ek het gesê, na independence gaan ek terug Angola. Waar is die bome in die land?
Well, it was like a dream. Of course, though I I hoped that Namibia would be free, but I did not think that I would be alive to see Namibia free. But the grace of God, I survived.
I came back intact. I was wounded 3 or 4 times in the battle, but not serious, nothing wrong with me. Just a normal human being like others. And therefore, I'm just one of those survivors. But credit goes to those who have really suffered physically, lost some body parts, and those who have died on the battlefield, not us.
When Namibia got her independence, the ANC and the Africans in South Africa were rejoicing, saying they see the light at the end of the tunnel becoming brighter and brighter and nearer, because you see, from all the way from Congo to Angola to Zimbabwe to Mozambique and now to Namibia. So this long front is independent.
98% of eligible voters voted in the elections of the 7th to the 11th of November. SWAPO won 57% of the votes and the DTA 29%. A constituent assembly was appointed. On the 1st of April 1990, Namibia became independent.
War is war, and things are ugly, and things are humorous, and you must have the capacity to accommodate all of them. But when it's over, and you have this situation where there is mutual respect for the opposing sides, even when they fought, as I said, as our people said, yes, SWAPO were good fighters. And we know that they said we were good fighters. It's not something that I dish up now, it's proven. And that mutual respect solves everything.